Hello YouTube, it's Ian here with Hobbies of Man once again, and today we're going to be doing a short comic book video. So I bought this comic book a while back. It's called Savage Tales, and it has 4 different stories in it. This is written by a bunch of people, but it is published by Dynamite, and I thought it was interesting to take a look at it because I haven't really seen many people talk about different comic book anthologies. There's one that's going on by Image right now that is like 12 issues long. I'm not necessarily sure I'm interested in most of the stories that are in them, but it is kind of interesting, and I didn't see anyone talking about it. But I don't want to go buy them all because I don't think I'll be able to find them. But I have this one by Dynamite, and I wanted to talk about it. So this one is called Savage Tales. Like I said, it's by Dynamite, and it has 4 different stories. The first one is a Vampirella story, and it's not really my favorite. I didn't really like the art style all that much. Which actually happens to be the case with most Vampirella stories, even though I really love the character design of Vampirella herself. Most of her stories don't seem really all that appealing, and the artwork for them doesn't really work with the character design. Like, you know, the character design of Vampirella invokes this kind of like, I don't know, sensualness to it, and really interesting, like, vampire-esque storylines to it. And most of the time, they don't really feel all that interesting or look all that really visually appealing. But this one doesn't really stray from that very much. It basically has Vampirella sitting in a bar, and she's at this bar. She's drinking a glass of blood because obviously she's a vampire, and the bartender knows this, so she gives her the blood. And then this guy shows up. He asks for a very fancy cocktail, and he starts talking to Vampirella, and she kind of notices that something's wrong with him. And eventually it turns out that this guy is the serial killer who then wrote down everything he wrote, or everything he did, into a book that he then published. Vampirella asked him a very, simple question. If he was to die, would he prefer hell on earth or real hell? And it turns out that he chooses Earth, but he doesn't know that it's going to be hell on Earth. He just knows that he's basically going to be immortal and he's always going to stay on Earth. And the thing is that this is basically Vampirella choosing how to punish him. And so we have very short time skip scenes where we get to see her kind of doing things. And the story ends basically right where it began, where there's this new person that shows up. And I don't know, I didn't really like it. I didn't think it was really meaningful. There wasn't really anything to it that spoke about Vampirella to me or that spoke about anything meaningful. So I didn't really like it. But it is what it is, right? Anthologies are not always going to be all hits. Sometimes there's going to be a miss. And this one really is the only miss in this little set of stories. So that's good. The second one is a Alan QUARTERMAIN story. I don't know too much about this character, but I thought he was interesting. Basically, the story follows this guy who looks somewhat like a cowboy, or like he's in the outback, as you guys can see right there. And it turns out he's in South Africa. But he's following the trail of these people that happen to be these cult leaders that are trying to convert people to their cult. And eventually we see that he managed to find them. They're at the coast of this part of South Africa, and they're invoking Cthulhu. They're trying to call Cthulhu, the elder god, to show up. And they do, and this guy kills them all, and he kind of deals with the fact that he saw Cthulhu, and then Cthulhu goes back into the ocean. There really isn't much to it. The story doesn't really seem to be all that, deep, but the mythos of it is kind of interesting, and the way it's written is kind of interesting, and the art style is actually the most important part, and it's the most satisfying one to look at. So I quite like that. But there really isn't anything to it either, so it is what it is. I think the second best story, or actually the best story, is actually the Red Sonja story, which is called The Executioner's Sword. And this one has great artwork. I really like the Red Sonja character. I really like warrior woman kind of characters. And Red Sonja is specifically very warrior woman-esque, but also has very, ridiculous armor. And I really like the character design for her. But the artwork for this story was really good. It's called The Executioner's Sword, like I said. And it follows in very kind of similar, like standard Red Sonja tropes. She enters the village. She sees there's something wrong with the village, and she decides to find out what's wrong with it and then fix the issue. Turns out that there's this guy who happened to find a sword, and the sword is cursed with hunger for people's blood. And so he becomes the executioner of the town and starts dispensing justice to everyone. And eventually, they battle, and Red Sonja has to put away the man and the sword so that no one can ever find them. And I thought that one was the best story. It's not really that great, but it is probably the best one so far, and I quite liked it. I really liked the art style, like I said, and it was probably the most interesting because it is very in line with a lot of other Red Sonja stories, and I seem to really enjoy those. So there it is. That's basically all there is to it. So then the last one is Captain Gulliver Jones. It's called His War, and it's like this. The art style isn't really my favorite, but it kind of works for the story. And I don't know this character too much, but apparently Gulliver Jones is another one of these John Carter of Mars copycats. He basically is a guy who was a warrior, eventually ends up on Mars, and he becomes even a greater warrior and then comes back to Earth, and he doesn't really fit in anymore. So it is what it is. The art is okay. Mostly it just deals with the fog of war of this guy before he somehow seems to go back to Mars, and that's cool. There really isn't much to it. Overall, the stories here weren't really amazing. They were pretty short. I think all of them were about 10 pages long. And I didn't love any of them, but I think the Red Sonja one was probably the best. I was pretty interested in Alan Quatermain, and I would be interested in following more of Gulliver Jones' stories. So at the very least, this book managed to, incite some interest in me in other stories that are available by Dynamite. So at the very least, it did that. I wouldn't necessarily say that it's the most compelling storylines ever, but it was at least a little bit of fun and an easy kind of read to get me interested in these new characters. So overall, I did really enjoy reading this. It just wasn't like as amazing as I thought it would be. Because if you look at this and you look at all the covers that are for this story, they all basically only focus on Vampirella and Red Sonja. And with a name like Savage Tales, you would think that it'd be like Red Sonja and Vampirella like wrecking house. And they really aren't. So it kind of feels like a little bit of false advertising for me. But I'm pretty new to comic books, so maybe this is pretty standard, and I just fell for the obvious trap. So it is what it is. Overall, I did enjoy it, so I definitely recommend you guys check it out if you guys are interested in anything I said. So yeah, thank you guys very much for watching, and see you guys later.